Hi there, my name is Erica Van Overloop, and I'm a counseling psychology doctoral student here at the University of Southern Mississippi. Today's talk is part of our virtual health education series that is being provided by the Office of Health Promotion at the Moffitt Health Center. Today, what I'm going to be sharing with you are some tips for having a successful semester as we navigate this new type of learning environment. I want to first start by saying welcome back, Golden Eagles. I know this semester probably looks a lot different than semesters we are used to having or what we anticipated this semester to look like. So with that, I thought it would be helpful to create and share with you guys some tips for maintaining our physical, emotional, and academic well-being that can help us have a successful semester. I'll start the talk today by sharing some quick tips for maintaining our emotional and physical well-being, and then the bulk of today's talk is going to focus on some tips and strategies for maintaining that academic well-being, specifically focusing on tips for developing good study habits, tips for staying organized, how to develop some time management skills, and then we'll wrap up today by talking about some tips for addressing procrastination. So as I mentioned, I wanted to start today by just sharing some quick general tips for maintaining our physical and emotional health. Right now, as we are currently battling a pandemic, our physical health should be of the utmost importance. So really making sure that you're prioritizing your physical health to keep you and the people around you safe is one of the most important things we can be doing right now. And this can be done through using preventative measures such as washing your hands, wearing face coverings, and adhering to the physical distancing guidelines. It also may be helpful to engage in some self-assessments to help notice, record, or document any changes within your physical health that you may notice, or if you start to develop any symptoms. If you do start to develop symptoms or begin to feel ill, your best idea is to contact the clinic or another medical facility and get yourself tested to be on the safe side. If you do start to feel sick or ill, make sure you notify a professor or an instructor and let them know so they can be able to help you make some accommodations for what your coursework may need. As always, physical activity, getting enough sleep, and eating healthy are really important components in maintaining your physical well-being. It's also really important to make sure that we are keeping tabs on our emotional health as well. So in a time where we are instructed to limit our social interactions and social engagements, that can be hard for some people to do because as humans, we thrive on that human connection and human interaction. So it's really important to make sure that you're taking time in your days and your weeks to stay connected with the people that you're closest to. So engaging in social connections or activities that still allow you to be safe. So using things such as FaceTime, social media, text messages, and any other type of way that you are able to stay connected while still keeping you and your friends and family safe can be really helpful in keeping you emotionally healthy. It's also really important, especially for college students, to know your limits and when to say no. If you are a full-time student and also working and also raising kids and maybe have parents at home that you take care of, you may have a lot on your plate right now. And sometimes it's important for us to know what we have on our plate so we're able to say no when we need to. If you take on other obligations that may fill your plate too much, you're going to be more likely to feel stressed and overwhelmed, which is going to lead to some difficulties in other areas. So it's really important to have an idea of what you've got on your plate, how much you can handle, and then make the decision if you feel like you're able to accept other obligations or if it's a time where you just need to politely decline. Which moves into the next tip, having a work-life balance. Again, as busy college students, sometimes our days are filled with nothing but school or work, and sometimes that's just part of the college student process. But what's important is that you make time in your days or on the weekends to balance that work life with personal activities and tasks that you like to do that are disconnected from school or work life. It's also important to ask for help when needed, and this can be help with emotional things, needing someone to talk to, having someone help you problem solve, having someone help you walk through a decision, or maybe you're just having a bad day and need to vent. Um, it's really important that you have people in your life that you feel like you can connect with and talk to and ask for help when needed, so you don't have to struggle and try to deal with things on your own. Getting into a routine is especially important for maintaining our emotional health because in a time where everything is so uncertain right now, routines provide us with consistency and predictability within our days. And when we're able to predict what our days look like, there's less likelihood of us feeling stressed or overwhelmed over the unknown because we know what our days are going to entail. So getting in some type of routine can be really helpful and be really beneficial to your emotional health. And then finally, one of the most important tips that I could provide for maintaining your emotional or mental health is to make sure that you're engaging in some type of self-care or some type of me time. So whether that's a bubble bath at the end of your day or taking some time to go for a run or exercise um, on the weekends, whatever fits with your schedule, whatever you like to do, just make sure that you're finding something within your schedule that you do for you. So as you can imagine, keeping your physical and mental health in check is really important because these two components go hand in hand with making sure that you're going to be a successful student. If we start to let our physical and mental health slip a little bit, this is going to bleed into our academic obligations and responsibilities, which then may have some consequences if we're not able to manage all of these areas. So I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about ways to help maintain your academic well-being. And I want to start by providing some tips for developing good study habits. So the first tip is to pick a time during your week that you're going to focus on just studying. So picking a time that you dedicate to work, studying, or school-related tasks, and then block it off for the whole semester. By doing this, it'll provide you some routine and consistency within your days, again, which is beneficial to not only your emotional health, but your physical health as well. When it comes to studying, writing, or reading, it can be helpful to do those things in chunks rather than trying to do them all at once. And this is important because it can help you remember things a bit better because you're able to process information better. So an example of this may be if you have to read 5 chapters for one of your classes, you're going to be better able to remember them if you read one chapter at a time and allow that information to process versus trying to cram reading 5 chapters in within one sitting. Another tip is to take notes whenever you can in class, during lectures or PowerPoints, and also while reading and studying for your classes. So taking notes and writing things down is one way that information tends to stick a little bit better in our brain, especially if you're writing these things down in your own words. When we put things into our own words, this also helps with us to remember it a little bit better because it's coming from our own words, which means there's a little bit more meaning to it versus what the textbook says. Another tip for using notes is to review them. And you should review them after your class and then again before the following class. So if you have a class on a Monday evening, it can be helpful to review those notes after the class has taken place to be exposed to that information again. And then it also can be even more beneficial to review those notes again next Monday before that class starts. This will help you get some repeated exposure to that content, which also is going to help you remember things better. Another tip for notes is to rewrite them. A lot of college students will rewrite their notes after a lecture to maybe organize them a little bit better or to make them a little bit neater or to serve as another way to get familiar with the information. And those are all great techniques to have, but what may be even more beneficial is to rewrite them using a different format or method. So say, for example, if you took notes in class and listed them in bullet points and used just couple word phrases or sentences, what you could do when going back to rewrite them is to use a different format, such as putting them in a flow chart or using them, putting them into a diagram, or maybe you could fold the paper in half and rewrite them using the Cornell note style. Just using a different method will help you have to reproduce that information again in a different format, which is also going to help you remember that information a little bit better. Another important tip, especially for college students, is to try to avoid cramming for exams the best you can. When we cram for exams, our brains often go into overload mode. So when we cram for exams, typically what happens is we're trying to gather all of this information and remember a bunch of information in one sitting. And the issue with that is that our brain can't hold, process, and remember all of that information at once. So it's kind of an overload of information that we can't keep within our brains. So one way to study that is going to be a little bit more effective is to studying for shorter periods of time across the span of multiple days. So if you have an exam on Friday, it would be more helpful to study for a couple hours on Monday, study for a couple hours on Tuesday, study for a couple hours on Wednesday, and so on, versus staying up all night Thursday and trying to cram 5 chapters worth of review into a couple of hours. Again, this is going to help you with retaining that information a little bit better due to having that repeated exposure. And then finally, one of the most important tips for studying is to make sure you take breaks. The way our brain processes and retains information is when it's resting. So we have to make sure that we're giving ourselves breaks in order to remember any of the information that we're trying to learn. So part of being successful and having good study habits is being organized. So staying organized is really key to being a successful student. And one way that you can start to get organized is to get familiar with what your semester schedule looks like and get that written down someplace. So whether that is in a planner, on a piece of paper, on a in your phone calendar or a Google calendar, whatever you have, it can be really helpful to get that set in stone someplace so you'll be less likely to miss appointments, due dates, or meetings. It also can be helpful to get informed with the more administrative parts of being a student. So taking a look at your student SOAR account to see if you have any balances, a bill that needs to be paid, if you have any financial aid awards that need to be accepted or declined. It also can be helpful to see if there's any holds on your account for any reason. So you'll want to make sure you get that taken care of so something like that doesn't cause problems for you later in the semester. It also can be helpful to get familiar with the semester calendar so you'll have a good idea of when finals are, when the drop dates for classes are, and any holidays that we might not have to be in class for. We are now in the second week of classes, so hopefully the syllabi and course requirements and expectations have been shared with all of you. But one thing that is really helpful in getting organized for a course is reviewing that syllabus for each class as soon as you possibly can. By doing this, you'll have an idea of what that class is going to require from you, what textbooks or materials you may need, what assignments you're going to have to do for that class, and then also when those assignments are due. So this will kind of give you a lay of the land for that class so you'll know what your expectations are. One of my favorite tips, and is something that I think everyone could benefit from, is to use some type of planning system. So whether this is in an actual hard copy planner or agenda, or maybe you like to use your phone calendar and do electronic planning. Whatever you have that works for you is totally fine. When using a planning system, you'll want to set reminders for your online meetings via Zoom or Teams, maybe when your classes are meeting on Zoom or Teams, what assignments you have, when the due dates are, and those types of things. So again, having a planning system of some sort will help serve as kind of a guide for your semester and an outline for all of the things that you have to do to be a successful student. It's also really helpful to have one folder or binder for each class that you're taking to help keep the materials for that class organized. So having a spot where PowerPoints, handouts, syllabus, all of the things for that course stay together in one place. This will help reduce papers getting lost or mixed up into another course's folder, or accidentally submitting the wrong assignment to the wrong professor, and those type of things. And then finally, this is also really important since a lot of our learning is going to be taking place virtually this semester, is stay on top of checking your email, your Canvas announcements or messages, or any other type of online communication method that your professor may be using. Part of staying organized and being a successful student is learning some time management strategies. So I'm going to share just a couple ideas here with you that you may be able to use to help improve some time management skills. So the first one is to map out your semester. And this kind of goes hand in hand with staying organized and using a planning system. So say you have a planner, it can be helpful to kind of map out what your semester is going to look like in terms of due dates, classes, appointments, assignments, and those type of things, especially for assignments, so you don't get behind and let assignments pile up and then end up having some type of consequence later down the road. So one way you can do this is to write down all of the due dates for all of your assignments for each one of your classes. And then what you can do is go back and break those bigger assignments, the papers, studying for exams, midterms, and that type of thing, down into these smaller, more manageable pieces that eventually are going to lead up to the due date. So an example of what this may look like would be something like, say you have a research paper that has 5 sections, that you have to do, that's due at the end of the semester. So instead of staying up all night the night before it's due trying to write a 10-page research paper, you could break that down into smaller assignments that are a bit more manageable. So say one week you work on the introduction, then you spend a couple of days working on the method section, and then you spend a couple of days working on the results section, and then a couple of days working on the discussion, and then finally you spend a couple of days working on the conclusion. By doing that, it's going to be a little bit more manageable. You may not feel so overwhelmed by trying to crank out 10 papers all at once. And then when the due date comes, you'll just have to put them all in one document and submit it. It also can be helpful to kind of section out or plan your days by estimating how much time you need for each assignment, task, or activity. So an example of this may be if you have to read 3 chapters before your Wednesday morning class, you're going to want to put time in your schedule to make sure that you have time to read all 3 chapters. So what you don't want to do is try to cram those 3 chapters into a 1-hour period, because you're likely not going to be able to retain any of the information you read because you're going to be speeding through it to get it done. So instead, you'll want to section out or plan out some hours earlier in the week where you're able to sit down and get through all of the reading in a way that you're going to remember what you're actually reading. Another helpful tip is to focus on what's in front of you versus something that's later taking place in the semester. So if you have an assignment that is due, say next week, and then there's an assignment that's due in 4 weeks, you're going to want to focus your attention on the assignment that's due first versus the assignment that's due later. And the intention here is that you don't get kind of wrapped up in the things that don't require your immediate attention and then let the immediate task or activity kind of get slipped through the cracks and then it not get done. So you'll want to focus on what you have in front of you based on due dates, generally for college students. And then I also wanted to share a quick, easy tip that can be helpful for some time management things. And this is something that you may have heard of or you may be familiar with, but it just may be called something different. But this is called the Pomodoro technique. And essentially what you do here is identify a task that you need or want to do, and then you set a timer for 25 minutes and work on that task uninterrupted for 25 minutes. Once that timer goes off, you give yourself a short break somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, This can be used for running to the restroom, grabbing a drink, grabbing a snack, something quick, and then you'll come back to the task and set the timer again for an additional 25 minutes. And what you're going to do is repeat this process until the task is done. So what this does is it allows you to have a set block of time where you work on the task uninterrupted with no distractions, but it also gives you a break in there so you don't feel like you're having to power through and cram to get a task done. Because again, those breaks are really important for us to be able to produce efficient work and to be effective in our work. Because like I said earlier, our brain has to be able to rest and process for us to be successful and productive. For each 25 for each 4 25-minute working periods, you then take a longer break, somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. Again, just to give yourself a break. Then when you come back, you'll be ready to go again. So you'll repeat this process until your task is done, and this can be adapted to all different types of tasks, whether it's school related or not. And it's a good way to just allow yourself to have uninterrupted time with no distractions to getting your work done. I will note for this task, it is most helpful that during the 3 to 5 minute break, you avoid starting any other type of task or activity that's going to distract you from the initial task. And then finally, I want to share some tips for helping to address procrastination. So one of the biggest or most common reasons that many people procrastinate is because we don't know where to start, or we are overwhelmed by all of the things that we need to do. So one way to counter this is to make a to-do list to help identify the start point of what it is we need to get done. And for college students, it can be helpful to make this to-do list and list the items based on priority. And so for a lot of college students, that priority may be by due date. So like I mentioned, you want to focus on what you have in front of you, not something that's due 8 weeks from now. So when you're making that to-do list to help identify that start point, you're going to want to list the things that are due first. With that, it can be helpful to tackle the biggest or most time-consuming task first. So another reason that we often procrastinate is because we have a big, time-consuming, dreadful task that we don't want to do. It may be difficult, it may be boring, we maybe just don't have any motivation to do it for a number of different reasons. And sometimes in situations like that, we end up doing what we call filler tasks, which are smaller, littler tasks that we do that we think we're being productive, and maybe we are being productive, but what we're actually doing here is fueling the procrastination toward that bigger thing that we need to get done. So my recommendation for that is when you have a big task that you need to do, try to resist the urge to do those filler tasks to resisting those filler tasks and avoiding that bigger task, and try to tackle that big task head on. With that, it can be helpful to break those bigger tasks or bigger assignments into smaller pieces. Again, because when we break them down into more manageable pieces, we're less likely to feel stressed and overwhelmed by them. One tip that has been helpful for me personally sometimes is to give yourself deadlines before the true deadline. So an example of this may be, say you have a paper due Friday at noon, but you may actually tell yourself that that paper is due Thursday evening or Friday morning. And that way you'll make sure that the paper is actually done by the time it's due. And it also will help with reducing the tendency to kind of procrastinate or scramble to get it done last minute. And then the last two are things that you can do to kind of help your motivation to get things done. So the first one is to find something that motivates you. So working at home sometimes can be challenging for people because there's a lot of distractions in our environment. You may have a cute pet who tries to lay on your keyboard every time you have to get work done. Or maybe you have roommates who sometimes are a little bit loud and distracting. Maybe you have kids at home. So there's all type of things that we may have at home that prevent us from getting work done, which kind of fuel our procrastination. So what can be helpful to do here then is to find something that motivates you when it's work time. So setting up a desk in your room or having a designated spot in your home where you sit and do work. If working at home isn't something that's realistic for you, maybe moving to a coffee shop to get some work done or going to a library where it's nice and quiet. So finding something that just motivates you to get your tasks and assignment done can be really helpful. And then finally, rewarding your good behavior. So this is important not just in terms of addressing procrastination or getting your schoolwork done, but really in all aspects of life. When you get something done, it's important to celebrate your success and your achievement, especially when it comes to getting assignments or schoolwork done. If you reward your good behavior, you're going to be more likely to repeat that behavior again in the future, which is how that helps to reduce your procrastination then. And then finally, I would like to wrap up by sharing just some general tips for having a successful semester. So the first and most obvious one is to go to class. Going to class is the place where you're going to be exposed to the information you need to know, where you're going to have the opportunity to engage with your classmates and peers, and even have your professor there to help answer any questions that you may have. Of course, if you are sick or have a personal emergency, please do not go to class. If something comes up and you need to miss class, it's going to be your best idea is to let your professor know that something has come up, and then they will help you kind of put a plan in place to make accommodations for you. The next kind of obvious and important tip is to be on time. So the beginning of class is usually when professors and instructors make important announcements. And if you're late, you're not going to hear them. So make sure that you can try to be there on time. It also can be really helpful to know your way around campus. This is something that will save you time later, so you're not getting lost or searching for something when you have a short period of time, or having to meet somebody. So try to figure out where the places are that you think you're going to need, Starbucks, where food is, where bathrooms in the buildings are, maybe where your professor's offices are can be helpful. So when you get a chance and back on campus, it could be helpful to kind of give yourself a self tour and just get familiar with your surroundings. Also, it can be helpful to ask for help when you need it. Our professors are here to help us. So if you feel like you're falling behind or you're not sure what's going on, try to ask for help as soon as possible so you don't get too far behind. Which again goes into that next tip is to don't be afraid to ask questions. Again, we are students who are learning. Our professors are here to help us learn and answer our questions. So don't be afraid to ask questions if there's something that you don't understand or need some clarification on. And finally, I think the most important tip of this entire talk is to don't forget to have fun. College is a time for learning and growth and having fun. So make sure you put some time in your schedules to do things that bring you joy and happiness. I hope this presentation has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, please reach out. Again, my name is Erica Van Overloop, and I thank you guys for tuning in.